In the meantime, I swing off to the right, and I realized I had been airborne in an airplane that you typically would fly for 4 hours. I've been flying for over 4.5 hours. And all I know is, and this is as God is my witness, and the crew chiefs will tell you this, I figured I wasn't going to make it back to Ban Me Thuot. I just didn't have any gas left. I mean, both of the wing tanks were empty, supposedly. You got fuel in the lines. You don't know how long that's going to last. Putted along, and I used an old trick that one of the old Connie drivers who had 55,000 hours and something, he said, he was showing you how to go up. If you can get the runway to go under your nose, you can chop the power, drop full flaps, an airplane will come down. You'll probably land on the runway. So I tried to climb as slow. I was probably climbing about 50 feet a minute, and I don't know, and I was just milking it. I had the thing leaned out. I didn't want to burn any fuel if I didn't have it. And so I climb out, and I think I managed to get up to about 1,000 feet. Get to 1,000 feet, Ban Me Thuot runway comes up, City Field, as it disappears under my nose, throttle to idle, full flaps, head for the runway. Go down to the runway, I flare, I land, I'm taxiing down the runway. You know what happens next. I make the turn off the runway onto the taxiway, and the engine quits. Ran out of gas. That's how close it was. But let's face it, those guys, we needed to get those guys out of there, and there's nothing going to stop that number 2 helicopter or me from doing whatever it took to get them out. So managed to get off. Crew chiefs come and they push us into the revetment. And then here's where it really gets interesting. You don't realize how tense you are when you're going through this, being shot at, being hit, and losing, and doing all the stuff you're doing. You just don't realize how tense you are. I mean, your body becomes kind of a knot. You're so focused. And so the crew chiefs come over and, they open the door, and I couldn't move. My muscles were so stiff and so tight, I could not get out of that airplane. So, I don't know. I said, you're going to help me out of this thing. So they unbuckled my seatbelt, and I kind of rolled to the left, and they kind of helped me get down off the plane. I swear to God, it must take me 30 seconds, a minute, just to stand up straight. It was that tense. And then I went back to the hooch and finished my beer, which I'd started 24 hours ago. We fast forward 43 years. And I was now working as a civilian, working the defense business, and I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'd finished a long day at, running around to various groups, Air, Navy, Marine Corps, trying to sell them some of our communications gear. And I'm sitting at Dulles Airport in D.C., and it's about 4:30 in the afternoon, and my phone rings. I'm waiting for my plane to go back to Reno to be with the family. My phone rings, and a guy says, "Is this Captain Mike Leonard?" And I said, "Yeah, but I've been a captain for many years. I retired from the Air Force as a lieutenant colonel. But I said, I've been a captain for many years." He says, "Well, were you in Vietnam?" "Yeah, I was." "Were you in there 69, 70? Were you there? Were you at Ban Me Thuot? Were you this? Were you that?" He was starting to ask me questions. I said, yeah. And I'm thinking, who's this? I must know this guy. Who's calling? He says, "Well, my name is Mark Mitchell." He was with an Army bird dog company. I think they were the Seahorses, was their call sign. And so Mark says, on our website that we've got, somebody had inquired about a situation that they were involved in. They were a door gunner on a helicopter in Vietnam, Thanksgiving Day, which, by the way, was the day of this action, was Thanksgiving Day of 1969. He was a door gunner, and he's been looking for the 01 pilot. Well, he was looking on the Army side at the one that the Army's flew. And they said, no, they don't know anything about it. But it was interesting because Mark Mitchell, who was the kind of the head of that Seahorse contingent, Mark had just been on a website called SOFREP, SOFREP. And SOFREP was just beginning, and it was being started by a Navy SEAL by the name of Brandon Webb. Brandon had taken a lot of his podcasts and his various media stuff that he had been doing. Brandon had written half a dozen books by this time. And Brandon was a good friend of mine. And so Brandon said to me, can I interview you for SOFREP? I said, certainly. So I interviewed with Brandon. We did one of these deals like you and I are doing. And it was put on SOFREP, forward air controller, experience in Vietnam, As part of that, this fellow, Mark Mitchell, happens to read this rendition about what happened in Vietnam and what the FAC does and just all this stuff. And there's a picture of me and a picture of my airplane in there. And Mark, I guess, reached out to Brandon and said, would you mind if I call this guy? Because oddly enough, what I described in the shucks column of this website interview was eerily similar to what this door gunner was inquiring about from them. So he puts the pieces together, and now I'm on the phone with him in Dulles Airport 43 years later. 43, I guess it was, yeah. And I said, yeah, Mark, he says, you know this guy? He says, he's been looking for you, and he'd like to talk with you. And I think you guys are the same mission. He put two and two together, got me together with the door gunner. So it was Thanksgiving Day, 2012, that I get a call from this young man who's now 60-some years old. And he says, I want to thank you. He says, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have a life. I wouldn't have a kids. I wouldn't have grandkids. And he's got them all. Keep in mind that the bird dog will fly for about 4 hours, 4.5, maybe. And I've got it leaned out. And I'm flying around. And so finally, I get a call from the camp that said, hey, we've got 2 flights of gunships, 2 flights of 2 coming in. And so the first flight came in and they didn't hit the ground. We're on the ground at the camp for more than 15 seconds. And one guy lifted off before the second guy came in and said, I got hydraulic problems. I got to get out of here. I don't know if I'm going to make it. So his wingman took him and they went and they flew back to Ban Me Thuot. Meantime, here comes the second group. And now they've got, full ammo, ordnance on board. They got enough fuel to play the game. And so they come in and I said, well, look, let me tell you what's going on. I'm taking an enormous amount of ground fire, small arms. And I've already been hit in the tail 2 or 3 times because you can feel the airplane as you get hit. This is where it's coming from. I'm talking to these helicopter pilots, which are all, 20-year-old kids. I said, don't go over here, don't go over there. I said, I got 51, I got 2 51 cals, one on one side of the road, one out here by the runway, and they're trying to, both of them trying to shoot you down. My suggestion is you head in, this heading, and shoot this area up over here. And they didn't pay a bit of attention to me. So the lead goes in first and strafes this area. He's shooting the area that I'm telling to, but he's coming in really at the wrong heading. Anyway, he comes in, he's shooting, and just as he turns off of his gun run, he turns and banks to the right, and he yells, I'm hit, I'm going down. And so he goes down, crash lands, probably, and I mean, I'm flying at the same altitude he is. I'm flying with him. I mean, You know, I mean, it's like, I know I've been hit. He just got shot down. So, and he crash lands. Good news is all four of the guys, pilot, co-pilot, gunner, and the maintenance guy, they jump out. In the meantime, I know where they gotten shot from because they flew and turned their belly up, and it was a little line of banana trees. Looked like kind of a, somebody had planted them there. I don't know. It's an orchard type thing. And so they're under the trees, and so I swung out over these guys as they went down. I just shot a rocket at them near those trees, and I kept on going. I circled back around. And number two, I pulled him off. I said, pull off high, and he pulls off. So the second gunship is holding. He's screaming, my buddies are down. We got to get somebody to get them out of here and all that. And so they're calling the special forces camp to get a reaction team out. And there's, by the way, a small volcano, an extinct volcano, that's got a bunch of friendlies, some Montagnard RFPF on it. And they were going to try to come down the side of this hill and then maybe half a mile or less and help out. But there's so many bad guys all in that area that, who knew? So I get on the phone with the wingman. I said, okay, I don't think we've got time. I think we have time to get a reaction force in here. It might take them a long time, to get here. So he agreed. He says, I'm going to go in and get him. I said, no, let's think about how we're going to do this. So we talked for just a little bit, and I said, okay, before you make your run in, I said, you make your run in. I said, I'm going to be right ahead of you. And I said, what I'm going to do is I've probably got, 4 smoke rockets left or so. I said, I'm going to unleash them along this area it would have been to the west of where the chopper is, maybe 100 yards or so. He said, okay. He says, oh, let me know when you're ready to go. I said, I will. And so I look on the ground, and on the ground, the 4 guys that jumped out of the helicopter, they finally realized that what I had shot my rocket at was a bunch of bad guys in a tree line. And so they all jump up and all 4 of them jumped in a ditch, to the east or to the right of the chopper, and they're sitting in the ditch, and they're shooting it. They're going up and getting the machine gun off the helicopter, and they got the ammunition, so they're okay for a while. So meantime, I bring in number 2, and I said, let's go get them. So I unleash these 4 smoke rockets, and you have to assume when an NVA or see a FAC coming in and unleashing smoke rockets, one of the first assumptions that they have, I assume, is they think we're going to bring fighter bombers on them. We're marking a target. And so they usually go, heads down for just a bit. So after I did that, I rolled in, and I got my old car 15, So the only thing we had to do, and so I figured, well, I might as well be of some help here. I can't land there. So I said, I'm going to go in, and I rolled in. I'm leaning out, and I've got the car 15 out the window, and I'm kind of shooting to this tree line and try not to hit my own strut and wheel. When you do that, it's always a little danger there. You got to know what you're doing. So I'm just basically hosing down with my car 15. I'm just unloading along this trench line. In the meantime, the helicopter number 2, the wingman, he comes in, boom, he lands. These 4 guys jump on board, and they pull off. I swung around over the top of them, and they took off. And of course, they're slightly overloaded, and he had taken a hit as well going in, so he was worried, But he managed to get airborne, and flies out, and he flew directly over that 51 caliber machine gun that had been shooting at me. And the reason I know that, because I know exactly where it was. I was even trying to put artillery on. I think I might have knocked out the one that was near the airstrip, because I put a lot of artillery on that area. But this guy, I didn't get him. In the meantime, defilade fire, enfilade, defilade. What had happened was that all this stuff is going on. It's below the other 51 cal that was trying to shoot us. So when he lifted off, though, and now he flies right over the top of him, I don't think the guys on the 51 realized that this guy was coming right over the top of him, and so he didn't even shoot. He just, just ducked down. I relate the story because it was probably one of the more traumatic events. Matter of fact, it's in my book, I relate the whole thing. But what happened was was in Giannea, and George Latin said, "Hey, he just got a call from the ALO up at Ban Me Thuot, and he says he needs you to come up if you wouldn't mind, go help out for maybe a week or so because they're short of a FAC up there." So I flew up there, and so that day I landed. I think I flew it the second time, and I flew a VR mission around the area, and I knew the area, and I came back in and I landed. And I'm thinking it was around 4:30, cocktail hour, and I head to the hooch, where the MACV and the FAC unit was. And if you know your history and know anything about the geography of that area, we lived in, I think it was the Emperor Baodai's hunting lodge, and it was a very interesting, huge facility, but it was made of mahogany, and so you'd go through into the screen door, and I'd walk in, and I'd have a beer or something, and so they had a hooch, they had a bar in there, and so I'm drinking a beer, and I'm drinking a beer with the ALO and another FAC by the name of Ed Bullard. Ed and I flew later with the 89th at Andrews, presidential flight. Anyway, Ed's there and I'm there, and maybe two or three guys. And the radio operator runs in the door, and I probably hadn't 2 sips out of my beer. And he says, "We've got Duklop Special Forces camp on the line. They're under attack." Now it's getting dark, and the Bird Dog is not a night flying airplane because we just don't have instrumentation. So we run down to the Radio Shack, and the guy says, "We need some help," and da-da-da-da. They said, "Well, can you hold off until morning? We'll be out there at first light." He says, "Yeah, we probably can. Don't know nothing big yet, but probing attacks, a lot of mortar, a lot of our RPGs and things like that." So in the meantime, they're adjusting artillery around the perimeter to kind of keep the bad guys away. So I go to bed, I drop my beer, put it away, finished it, whatever. Went to bed. The ALO there, Ted Nagy was his name. Ted said something about, "First light, I want you airborne," and he says, "You just flown that area, you know it well." No, okay. So I get up, and first thing in the morning, 5 o'clock, I'm up. 6 o'clock, I'm outside. I'm heading to the airfield. It's still kind of dark, and I'm looking, and there's a cloud layer. Cloud layer is maybe 1,000 feet, but it's overcast. And so I get in the plane, and I'm thinking, if it's 1,000 feet here, the terrain out there is not, I don't know how I'm going to get under it if it's too low. But I figured I'll give it a go. So I get airborne just as the sun came up, and I'm heading southwest down the highway. And as I approach, it's maybe not more than 25, 30 miles from Ban Me Thuot down there. And as I'm heading down there, there's a ridge line that runs kind of on the east side of the valley where this camp is. And so the ridge line, the weather is now down, sitting on top of the ridge line. So I can't get in there. I can't even get into the weather to go in. So I decide, and these guys are yelling, where are you? Come on, get in here. And so I'm going, okay, I've got to see if I can find my way into this place. So I turned around and I started to head back, thinking to myself, well, I'm waiting till the weather burns off and gets a little bit. Then I don't know what it was in my mind. I just thought, I know the terrain to the north of there is jungle, the north of us. So I flew a box pattern. I flew north. I did time and distance flying, and then I just made a turn, and I knew I was near the Cambodian border, but I did another time and distance and maybe flew a minute and a half or 2 minutes in this direction, which is due west. And then I hit it again, And I'm thinking, if I hit time distance, if I fly 2 minutes south, the train was lower in this direction. And so I ended up flying 2 minutes out of I was getting lower and lower because the weather was lower and lower. And then I remember seeing a stream, and if I'm 50 feet, or lower. I was in the treetops flying along. And just about the time I decided time to get out of here, pull up and go back east, I'll be darned if the train didn't kind of fall away, and I just kind of followed it across a road and into this large open area, and there's the Special Forces camp at Duklop. It's literally half a mile from me. I couldn't believe how I even got in there. So I managed to get in. I called him immediately. I said, what can I do? I said, I can't get any fighters in here. I just can't get them in because the weather's too low. He said, but I said, I can adjust artillery all day long until the cows come home. He said, well, fine. I called up the artillery bases. And I started adjusting 105s. I think I adjusted some, there was a 175, but 175s were, you're lucky if you can get it into the right area. They just weren't, but the 105s, so I got these 105s were in a fire base just to the east of us, and they started lighting up, and I put them up and down the runway and the tree line, and you get so good at adjusting artillery that you can literally adjust it by feet, 5 feet, by just simply moving them 10 yards and 10 yards this way and that way. And so that worked out very well. Started taking some very interesting ground fire, especially one, it was a 51 cal. It was what they call them, ZPU, I think, ZPU, whatever it was. And so as I get close to the end of the runway, up come this line of green tracers. So it looks like a ribbon cutting across my path trying to get me. And I just took a dive down, got below, the line of sight, I guess, and headed back east. Anyway, I'm going back and forth and doing this, adjusting artillery for probably had to be close to 2 hours.